Now this is going to be pretty off the cuff and feels good to be back in this chair. All right, so it has been a while since I've done this, and I'm ready to get back into the swing of things. So I'm going to be starting the year off with just going through last year and all the videos I should have made. I'm just going to start the year off fresh because I had such a big gap between my first few videos and this one. So this will be my year-end wrap-up for 2021. Basically, go through and try to go through as many of the movies, television, and video games that I have watched or played over the last year. I'm gonna kind of go in year beginning to the end of the year order, sort of, but some stuff's mixed up because I didn't really keep track as well as I would have liked of all the movies and stuff that I had seen in the last year. I'm going to try to do that better this year so I can do a really good wrap-up for 2022 leading into 2023 and hopefully have more reviews put out on a regular basis, as well as I want to do a series of retrospectives, so hopefully we can get started on that this year. We'll start with movies, and then I'm going to move on to TV, and then I'm going to move on to video games after that. The first one that was on the list is Raya and the Last Dragon. That was the Pixar's... Was that Pixar or Disney? Okay, so that was Walt Disney Pictures. Okay, so Raya and the Last Dragon was one of the first ones put out by Disney this year under their actual animation studios. I can never remember at this point which ones are Disney and which ones are Pixar. They have very similar styles. So I would put Raya and the Last Dragon under good, not great. A lot of the plot is all stuff that we have seen before many, many times. A chosen or put upon hero has to travel the world to collect a bunch of things in order to put the world back together, essentially. In this case, it would be Raya, the former princess of one of the 5 nations within it, teaming up with the last of the dragons, voiced by Awkwafina, who has quickly become one of my favorite people in movies right now. Overall, like I said, it was good. It's definitely worth your time. It's nice to see stuff that's just representing a different culture than we normally get in fantasy fare, especially from the mainstream animation studios. That's starting to happen more and more, and it's been nice to see stuff that isn't just European-style fantasy getting more playtime. Overall, it's worth your time to watch, but you don't really need to go out of your way for it. It is on Disney+, so if you've got that, it's an easy watch. Something good for the kids as well. It's not too intense, but it does have some, some really good moments in it. Next was, Spiral. Spiral from the Book of Saw was the attempted reboot of the Saw movies as written by and starring Chris Rock. And I personally enjoyed it. I'm not going to say it was good because it wasn't, but I enjoyed it for what it was. If you're talking about the overall groups of the Saw movies, it's definitely not high on the list, but it's not the lowest either. So, it's not as good as Saw 1 and 2, not as good as 3. It's probably better than most of the rest of them after that, though. But it does feel forced. Many of the quote-unquote traps, I hate that they're called that because they're not traps, they're tests. You don't get stuck in them in the same way. But, they felt a little bit forced, and too much of the movie, the people who are stuck in these tests are it's literally you just have to do something, and they just don't do anything. So my biggest frustration with a lot of the Saw movies is it became less about people solving these tests or finding ways around them as much as it was just, let's set it up and then make sure everybody dies by the end of it. It's it loses a lot of its weight when you know that every person is going to die by the end of it, because every person up to that has died, is my major critique I would have with the movie. I feel like all the performances were great, stylistically it was on point, keeping the social commentary, which has been very important in the movies at basically 3 and onward, or 2 and onward, really, it was good, and I felt like what they were trying to do with it was good. It just, the editing was really breakneck. It was really fast paced. There was often a lot of stuff going on in each scene, and people were just kind of screaming, and it didn't really work overall. But like I said, I enjoyed it for what it was. I went in expecting a Saw movie, and I got a Saw movie, so I can't really be too mad at it for delivering at that. Okay, next on the list is Profile. Profile is really tough. The basic premise of Profile, for those of you who missed it, because I'm pretty sure most people did, is it's based on the true story of a journalist who basically created an online relationship with a Islamic extremist fighting in the Middle East in order to get information on his group and possible human trafficking crimes that were happening within the organization. And the gimmick being that the whole movie is told entirely through computer and camera screens. So it's only the stuff that they were literally doing through the computer. Now, it feels very similar to the movie Searching, which came out a couple of years ago, starring John Cho, which I actually heavily recommend that. But the problem with this one in particular, because of the nature of having to condense everything into a 2-hour film and using the framing structure of it being entirely through computer screens, there's a lot of truncating of the actual processes of doing those things on the screen, which in a lot of ways really took me out of the scenario and made it feel too much like a movie. That and the way some of the scenes and the conversations are shot, it's very clear that it was actors acting and not real audio and video. So just on a purely technical level, it didn't quite do it for me there. But the overall story, if you can get past that, is good. And it has some really nice twists that come in the end that were genuinely surprising and really, really creepy with how that event played out. So overall, I enjoyed it. I give it another soft recommendation if you can find it. The only other thing that took me out of the movie is that for those who have watched the obscure show Toast of London on Netflix, the main Islamic fighter that she's talking to, all I could hear every time I saw him was, "Yes, I can hear you, Clem Fandango!" But beyond that, like I said, still very, good for what it is. Not amazing. I give it a tentative thumbs up. It's worth your time, but you don't need to go out of your way for it. Next was Wrath of Man from Guy Ritchie, starring Jason Statham. This is another hard one. The big problem with Wrath of Man was that it felt like 3 different movies mashed together, and in a way that didn't really work. The beginning of the movie was interesting for what they were trying to do. A little bit more dramatic, straight drama with a little bit of mystery thrown in as to who this guy is. Middle of the movie, then you're getting the background story of him, and you're getting the, a couple of the first action sequences, and, still felt very grounded and gritty if it was a little bit over the top. And then you get to the end of the movie, and it's just this 40-minute long action sequence that was also pretty great, if a little bit, like I said, a little bit silly, because some of the characters just act in strange ways, especially in this sort of situation. You would think, even with what's going down, that an armored car company would have better safeguards than what they're dealing with here. So the general plot is a mysterious person shows up and starts getting a job as an armored truck security guard, and it's very clear that he is searching for somebody for some reason. Eventually revealing that he was wronged by a group of criminals who hit an armored truck, and he wants to take them out, and he has a certain set of skills that will help him do so. It has some good moments, but overall it's really long-winded. It's like, if I remember correctly, it's like 2.5 hours long, and really didn't need to be. You could have told this story much better in a much shorter amount of time. It's another soft recommendation. I wouldn't go out of my way for it. It was just okay. You do get to see Post Malone get shot in the face, though. That was pretty great. Ooh. Oh, man. Okay. The next one was A New Order. And woof, that one was depressing. I believe it was a Spanish film about a revolutionary riot movement goes through this country. And you see this event and its aftermath through the point of view of an upper class family and a lower class family that works, some of whom worked for this upper class family. It is very dark, very brutal, and depressing to the point of like I felt dirty after watching this movie. It is so bleak. Like the nothing but bad things happen to literally all the characters in it. And I understand the point is that they're trying to tell the story of when these types of things happen, and these are things that all have actually happened in these situations where a political upheaval and rebellion has happened in a country, even in modern day. But it just, by the end of it, it was just felt like there was no hope for any of the characters, and it's just so oppressively bleak. I couldn't. It's impossible to recommend this. So yeah, New Order. It wasn't a bad movie, but it is so oppressively bleak that I can't recommend it to anyone. Just it's like if you watch the trailer and you think you want to see it and you'd like that, if you just go in knowing it is very, very dark and no one really gets out of it intact. In another bleak but not as bleak mode, next movie on the list is A Quiet Place 2. It hits a lot of the same beats as A Quiet Place 1, but does it not as well. It's your classic people make decisions that do not make sense over and over again. It's like, the monsters are around here, stay in this place, and then the character's going, oh, I just need this little thing that doesn't affect anything. Stupid decisions, like top to bottom, that just led up to a little bit of a disappointing movie. And the movie also ends in the same place as literally ends in the exact same place as the last movie. It just didn't totally work. That being said, like, it's fine for what it is. It's just, we already have A Quiet Place 1. There are some really amazing sequences in it. Like, the beginning of the movie shows all the stuff that happened on day one, and that was incredibly well done. It was a lot of long shots. I think it might have been a couple of them. I think might have been just one long shot at one point. But incredibly well done. Really gave you the idea of how much of a threat the monsters in this movie really are. But like I said, the rest of the movie, it's like, it was still good, and I still recommend it if you liked A Quiet Place 1, but it just feels like, it felt like a lot of it was just a rehash of the original, so it's like, it's good, it's not great, but if you liked the first one, you'll like this one. Okay, and on a very different note, the next movie on the list is Zola, which, from what I understand, granted I'm not a Twitter person and I never saw this story going when it happened, but tells the story based on an exaggerated version of apparently a true story that happened, where a woman essentially live tweeted her experience where she went down to Florida to go on essentially a stripping tour with a friend of hers that she met recently and her roommate and her boyfriend. Zola is a good movie, but is a weird movie. Partially because it's telling a story that is based on real events. It doesn't fit a traditional storytelling structure. They tried to structure it as well as they could, but there are some weird moments, and it ends on kind of like a goofy, low-key note after many of the events that happened. It is crazy to think of how easy it is for somebody. I mean, the darkest takeaway from this movie is just to show how easy it is for people to get roped into a situation that they don't understand, and leading to, in this case, almost getting human trafficked. Basically being she meets a person who takes them down to Florida from, I believe they're in, I can't remember where they start. They go down and it ends up turning out that they're not just there to strip, they're there to hook as well. Granted, she doesn't end up, the main character doesn't end up having to do any of that. She finds ways around it, but the situation just gets exceedingly sketchier and sketchier and exceedingly more and more dangerous as the week goes along, and also finding out that this person actually manipulated her into this situation. And yeah, it definitely goes in some places that you don't expect. That being said, it also has some really funny moments where they're talking about just very mechanically the process of everything that they're doing, acting as a stripper or a hooker, or dealing with the well-meaning but very dumb boyfriend. Also, some of the antics of the roommate, who turns out to be a pimp, who in particular just goes from silly to scary in a moment, is very well done. Overall, the performances are great. This one's a recommendation for me. I had a lot of fun watching this movie. Probably a good portion of it actually happened in the way that it happened, and the fact that it is telling this story so mechanically, as well as integrating some of the tweets themselves and the after-the-fact narration. Zola is great. I highly recommend that one. I liked it a lot. Okay, so the next movie on the list is Old, the latest from M. Night Shyamalan, which was my biggest almost of the year. It was almost a good movie. I have such a mixed... I generally like M. Night Shyamalan stuff, even when it's the weaker ones. There are only a few where I just flat out go, no, that was a bad movie. All of them I can find something that I liked in them. For instance, I enjoyed Lady in the Water. I don't care what anyone else says. And then his most recent output has all been fairly strong. I really liked The Visit. Other than the fact that it wasn't believable as a found footage film, all the actors were very clearly actors. Split was great, and Glass I really liked. The problem with Glass is that it doesn't make for a good movie because it's specifically commentating on the types of movies that people wanted it to be. So it was never going to be the big superhero mashup that they wanted it to be, because that's not what it was. It was commentating about how it's not that. It's more grounded. I hope that Glass did well enough that he can make another movie in that universe at some point, because it had so many implications for where that universe could go. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, going backwards though. So Old is simultaneously all of the best parts of M. Night Shyamalan movies while also being all the worst parts of M. Night Shyamalan movies. It is really well acted. The cinematography is solid. It's got an oppressive mood. The twists, I argue, are actually pretty solid, although I can see where people wouldn't like some of them. I think the explanation at the end is great, but it is very self-indulgent. The writing jockeys between overly expositional and just flat out, silly in the matter of seconds sometimes. So to give an example of the writing, when they initially get to the beach, there is a person already there who is recognized by one of the characters as a rapper who is named, I kid you not, Mid-Size Sedan. And that pretty much gives you an idea of how ridiculous some of the writing gets. The way they get out of this situation is equally... It feels too easy for everything else that happened. But as I said, it's got an oppressive atmosphere. It's got some really, really clever moments. It plays with the idea of things that would happen in a situation where you are growing old at rapid rates in some really cool ways. There are some plot holes and some scientific weirdness that goes with that, but overall, I struggle with whether to recommend it or not, because the stuff in it that's cool is really, really cool. The best of what M. Night Shyamalan does. But the stuff that's bad is really, really bad. He does a good job of playing with how these different characters would interact in this sort of situation. He comes up with some clever reasons for why certain things would work in Getting Out and wouldn't work in Getting Out, but it's hobbled by poor dialogue. It's really just, most of it is just poorly written dialogue. Just totally hampers the entire movie. It does have some really, really beautiful sequences. It has some really, really darkly beautiful sequences. It has some really genuinely scary moments. But it ultimately feels misguided, especially when I have looked into the graphic novel that it is based on. It feels like he added a little bit too much to it to make it to work. So uh, this one's neither a recommendation nor not a recommendation. It's an M. Night Shyamalan. You know what you're generally going to get out of it. If you feel like seeing it, go for it. The next one, and this is one I want to do a video of later talking about this. The Green Knight is the next one. So The Green Knight is a retelling of the story of Sir Gawain. And from what I understand, it varies from the main story in some distinct ways, but overall is a pretty faithful retelling of the story as it has been recorded. Personally, this one's a big recommendation for me. It is very well acted, very well directed. As far as tonally, it is very consistent and very interesting, very beautiful. It is incredibly well shot. The performances are all great. The story is really cool and really interesting, but this is the problem that I think a lot of people will have with it. Being a medieval epic, it's a very different type of storytelling than we're used to today. It is very much a series of loosely connected vignettes than it is a overall cohesive story. Generally speaking, the expectation of a modern film is that it tells a single story throughout it. Hero's tale, 3-act structure, all those different things. The problem with this is that it's based on medieval style storytelling, which is more a series of stories revolving around a character than it is a single character's journey. It is a single journey, but it's not that character's arc. So the movie kind of sticks to that. The character learns and grows over the film, but it's more of he learns something different in each situation, but it's not one long story. There are also a couple of sequences in there that just seem like they kind of happen for no reason, and they really do, and that's because that type of storytelling, that's what you get. You have a bunch of stuff that just happens that's unrelated to everything else. So while the movie does have ongoing themes of doing what's right, doing what's noble, accepting your fate, knowing when to accept your fate and when not to accept your fate, it does each of those individually. So you just have to go through the movie accepting everything that's happening as it's happening and not worry about the overarching plot, which is less important in the grand scheme of things. Really enjoyed that. Highly recommended. Oh boy, 9 Days. This is probably my favorite movie of the year. 9 Days, I feel like, went criminally underwatched. The general idea is that it's kind of hard to explain. The trailer does a much better job of it. So basically, it takes place like not in the afterlife, in a place outside of life, which in this case takes the form of a bunch of houses in a desert, and each person in these houses is a person whose job is to watch and record people going through their lives through their eyes. They have a bunch of screens that they say through their eyes. As part of that, every once in a while, they have to choose a new person to get a new entity to get the chance at life. So in this case, it takes the form of a bunch of people start showing up at the house, and he basically interviews them over the course of 9 days to see who he believes will have the best life or is most well suited for the gift of life. It's hard to say too much on this without giving away, but so as it goes along, you find out more and more, not only about each of these entities who all, literally just came into existence as the story begins. You also find out a little bit more and more about the character of the caretaker and his friend, and how their competing ideologies on who should and should not get a chance, and seeing these people just embracing all of these new experiences that come with life. The movie is basically a giant love letter to the joy and magnitude of existence. It's really it's genuinely amazing. There are so many moments in there that are surprising, funny, sad, beautiful. You will cry. I guarantee you will. But this is my favorite movie of the year. I feel like it got criminally overlooked. Everyone should give that one a chance. 9 days. Go look it up. Find it. Go see it. It's great.
And side 1.